On this Veterans Day, we recognize one of the most legendary battles in American military history. It's an incredible World War II story of survival and has a special connection to Camp Bowie in Brownwood, right here in Central Texas. In this special report, I take you to the battlefield in eastern France on the 80th anniversary of the fight. It's a place few people have seen. Rising up from the Vosges in eastern France is a dense, ominous forest. Beautiful and peaceful today. But 80 years ago, this was a frightening place. I had a rare opportunity to walk this forest with French historian Jerome Vienne.
The situation was very critical, very bad.
He knows this forest better than anyone.
It was a aid station of the Lost Battalion.
He says in the fall of 1944, 220 men, a unit that trained in Camp Bowie, Texas, found themselves surrounded by an enormous German force on this very spot.
It was certainly a big mistake to send a regiment so far behind the enemy line.
This battle would come to be known as the Rescue of the Lost Battalion. Trapped and severely outnumbered, Jerome shows me their only way to survive was to dig deep foxholes and fight. I'm sitting in a foxhole right now. It's where the Lost Battalion dug in. In fact, there's so many of these foxholes in this forest, and there's one just a couple of yards away. It's what they used to defend themselves against the enemy as they found themselves surrounded by the Germans 80 years ago today.
It was vital for them to have a big foxhole, a nice foxhole, cover of logs, to be protected of bullet and rain, for example.
No sleep, no food, no water, constant fear of death.
At the Texas Forces Military Museum in Austin, Texas, Director Jeff Hunt talks about the Lost Battalion's legacy and its importance to Texas history.
It is a story that I think very much encapsulates the steadfastness, the fortitude, the simple ability to endure almost incredible conditions.
Hunt credits their leader, Captain Marty Higgins, for getting them through. This is film from Higgins in that forest in 1944, and then talking about the battle 60 years later.
And the most significant thing was setting up a perimeter defense around all sides.
There was also Lieutenant Erwin Blonder, the radio operator, who stretched just one day's worth of radio battery to last a week.
If it wasn't for him and that radio, this story probably ends very differently.
This is the very radio Blonder used to relay their desperate need for supplies. That desperation led to innovation.
They came up with the idea of using P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers that were fitted with external fuel tanks or belly tanks. And instead of putting gasoline into these belly tanks, we'll put supplies, ammunition, battery, food.
One of those belly tanks sits preserved at the museum today. In fact, it was Jerome who found it.
Rescued at last after 6 days under incessant fire from an enemy on all sides.
The reason the story is so important is that, in spite of great odds, the Lost Battalion was saved. This old film was taken soon after their rescue. This is the Lost Battalion coming down the hill.
The 442nd Combat Team, composed of American citizens of Japanese ancestry, moves up to rescue the Lost Battalion of World War II.
And it took a highly trained and accomplished unit to pull it off. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team was a segregated unit, even though these Japanese Americans endured great prejudice from their own country. They are one of the most decorated units in American military history. Rescuing the Lost Battalion was one of their many accomplishments.
Tired men, tired to exhaustion, but unbeaten.
This classic newsreel was seen in theaters all over America. Captain Higgins can be seen celebrating, impressed by the 442nd's grit.
And to see these guys coming from, granted they were little, but God, they were tough. They were tough.
And the man on the stretcher is radio operator Lieutenant Blonder, suffering from severe trench foot.
It's very important to preserve this area.
As Jerome walks me through these hallowed grounds, he tells me few people have been here since the battle. Reminders of the violence are everywhere.
This is the head of a mortar. Artifacts still found in this forest today, including first aid kits, rations, bullet casings. Signs of a battle.
Even though it's considered one of the U.S. Army's greatest battles, few people know about this place. To be here in the Vosges Forest on the 80th anniversary of the battle is something I'll never forget. On this Veterans Day, we must honor these fearless Texans and the young men who saved them, recognizing the sacrifices they made for our country and the world. The rescue of the Lost Battalion.
We want to make it clear this was a fierce battle. It took great sacrifice for the 442nd to accomplish their mission, enduring over 800 casualties in that Vosges forest. I Company was hit the hardest, walking into the forest with 187 men and walked out with just 8. It drives home the sobering point: there are no happy endings in war.